Well, I'm live. Hi, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Cioffi. Welcome to what is usually the Joe Cioffi show, weather show, but tonight it is not just the Joe Cioffi show. It's going to be the Joe and Joe weather show. So hang on one second. I'm going to bring Joe up full screen, and there he is. Yay!
Yay!
So let me just put you in the corner. We can't see your chin, Mr. Rayo.
Well, they didn't fix it.
Well, get Mrs. Rayo to come down and move the camera. She did it the last time.
I can move the camera this way if you'd like.
Which way?
How's that?
No,
Wait,
now I can. Now your forehead is beautiful.
come on. Is that a little bit better?
No, I can see your nose and your eyes.
Is this live TV?
Of course it is.
It is.
You didn't think I was going to humiliate you privately, did you?
How's,
Okay.
How's that?
Okay. Now you're wider, but now we can see your chest. Okay. That's all right. Just a little bit more. A little bit more.
How's that?
Okay. That's
All right.
That's good enough. So,
Whatever.
how are you doing today? I haven't talked to you in a while.
Well, yeah. Well, we had. Well, you're down in the south. You're down below the Mason-Dixon line, I believe.
And oddly enough, I was colder than you all day yesterday.
Yeah. Well, yesterday was wonderful. We had temperatures in the 50s yesterday, and today, of course, we had temps only in the upper and middle 30s, and woke up this morning to about 2.5 inches of slushy snow. The 2.5 inches mainly on colder surfaces such as my wooden deck and the grass. My driveway had much less than that, and in fact, the sun did its job and pretty well took care of most of the snow by midday and early afternoon. So,
Well, I know there was 2 to 3 inches around my house
yeah,
in central Long Island. Long Island actually did fairly well, especially the further east you went. And I was looking at some of the numbers in eastern Connecticut. The eastern half of Connecticut got about 3 to 5.
yeah.
So it actually fired up, excuse me, rather nicely, going more east than anything else.
Yeah, and that's probably also why last night the National Weather Service, the various warnings and advisories were mostly concentrated to the east of New York City. Long Island, all of Long Island was under an advisory.
Right.
Westchester was under an advisory, but up here, Putnam County, Rockland, and Orange County were outside of the advisory
Yeah,
zone.
it's kind of the opposite of what it has been. The
Yeah, yeah.
the few events we've had so far. Let me just really quick, Joe. I just want to check to see. I'm going to switch you just off 1 second.
Okay.
I want you stay right there. I'm just making sure that your audio is fine because my levels say that it is. I don't see anyone complaining about the sound. As long as everyone is saying that, oh, everybody says we sound good. Okay. Hopefully it's not clipping. My audio's been clipping lately. I have to tell you, Joe, this has been so frustrating because I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm technically savvy, but I'm certainly not technically unsavvy. And I don't know if you've upgraded to Windows 10 on anything yet, but beware because it just does really weird things. It just resets defaults on its own. I know sometimes when it does updates, it'll go back to the original defaults. I had an absolute audio nightmare. I had everything fine for the last couple of weeks. And then I had to take everything out down on the road. And I'm in the middle of the live stream on Sunday, actually toward the very end of the live stream. I was about to put an end to it. And my audio just shut off. I didn't touch anything. All my audios were reset to zero. I don't know how it happened. I don't even want to know how it happened. But it's very frustrating.
Well, I never did switch over. My wife periodically will say, why don't you switch over to Windows 10? When are you going to go over to Windows 10? And I'm now getting, as we get closer to the end of the year, more messages that are popping up indicating that beyond a certain date in early January, all guidance for Windows 7 is going to end,
Yeah.
and I really ought to go to Windows 10. You know what? I ain't going to Windows 10, especially after what I've just heard about.
Well, a lot of people have had, it's typical with tech companies. They put out a defective product and then they just kind of fix it along the way. And in the
Mm,
meantime, you suffer all the consequences. All right, so let's talk weather. So I have to tell you, I'm actually kind of enamored with this pattern going forward over the next couple of weeks. I think we're going to have chances. I've often, you've heard me say patterns. They may not repeat exactly, but they do rhyme.
right.
And just looking at the way the upper air evolves after the Friday night Saturday storm. If you think back to um, our northeast snowstorm from at the very beginning of the month. A few days, it was a number of days before that, there was a catalyst storm that started the ball rolling, where it set the block up, and then you had the storm come into California. Well, it's not exactly the same, but the system for Friday night into Saturday, which is all rain all the way up to Caribou, is actually going to be a catalyst for another weaker version of a 50-50 low and sets up a little bit of a blocky look to the system for early next week. I'm thinking that it might wind up being, I know the GFS keeps wanting to take a primary up to Western Ohio and over to Lake Erie, but looking at the other models and looking at the fact that there's this, it's not very blocky, but it's slightly blocky. That maybe we could wind up with a low that's a little weaker and a little further south, and cold air a little more important. I don't know if you see it the same way.
Well, I've seen exactly what you just described on the GFS, trying to make this more of a wet as opposed to a frozen or white system, and the other system, the other models, trying to make this. But first of all, we're going to probably, once the precipitation begins here, we're not talking about the one coming our way for Friday night and Saturday, but the one coming our way for Monday night into Tuesday.
Right.
That system, once that system begins here, it's going to start probably as snow everywhere. And
I
that's
would
just,
think it would. I certainly would think it would, and I wonder whether it might wind up being where the inland areas stay mostly snow, and the coastal areas go over to sleet and rain, and there'll be a zone of transition in between. I mean, this is a lot to work out. We're only at Wednesday, and we still got a good 5 days ahead. But I just kind of, not just with that system, but I noticed even on the long range for the last number of days right through Christmas that there is a bit of a blocky look to things. And when you have a blocky look to things, stuff tries to happen.
you
That's
know,
just how I'm seeing it.
I've already gotten more than my fair share of comments from people who look at the models and are
Oh,
worried.
I
Say,
don't pay attention to
"Oh,
those
looks like it's
people.
going to be a snowy Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, doesn't it?" And I'm saying you're looking at something that's 2 weeks out and something that's going to go through a number of different gyrations and waffles and everything else.
Yeah, I'm not even touch. I'm just, I'm not even touching those comments at all. It's ridiculous. What am I supposed? How are you supposed to answer that? Yes. Okay. Yes. On Christmas Eve, on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, we're going to have X number of inches of snow starting at time A and ending at time B. No.
Right?
I mean, you know what it is? They want usually when I with those kind of comments, Joe, it's really they want reinforcement of what something they want. Okay,
Yeah.
they want snow for Christmas, and I get that. It's pretty and it's very nice. Can be a little inconvenient if you have to get around, but or a lot inconvenient if it's a serious storm. But it's basically, you want some sort of affirmation from someone else that's going to tell you, yeah, it is going to happen. So start getting excited now. Well, I'm not doing that.
No,
I'm just not doing that. I'm a
it's
mean.
enough.
I'm grinchy.
it's it's enough so that we're trying to figure out what the heck is going to happen early next week, and here we are have people talking about stuff that's going to happen, again 2 weeks from now. It's
Yeah.
just absurd. Although I did see, I looked on the GFS yesterday, the 12Z GFS, and they were suggesting something like 14 or 15 inches for the immediate New York area for Christmas Eve, Christmas
Oh
morning.
yeah. It's just gonna and you're gonna see that nonsense with the with those silly snow maps. I kind of wish. What was that? Did you
What was
move
what?
something? No,
Oh, that was probably upstairs, Mrs.
Oh,
Ray, in the kitchen, just moving her.
is she putting in a new floor?
No, she just moved the
She's
chair.
retiling, you know.
It,
She
it
just
must have
moved the chair.
reverberated.
Okay. I thought maybe my dinner was acting up, but that's another issue. Uh, I say, you know what? I'm gonna bring up. Let's bring up some maps here. First, I gotta find them.
Okay.
Hang on one second, Mr. Rayo. There you go. I brought up an old map that I had up there, so hang on one second. So, what would you like me to start with? I've got a surface map, I've got a radar, I've got a satellite, I've got the models, I've got the European. You tell me.
Well, first of all, tonight we are blessed with a rather unusual bit of numerology. What was the episode of I Love Lucy where
Oh, right.
where they had the numerologist
Yeah. Mr.
and
Merriweather.
Mr. Merriweather?
Right. I'm
Mr.
a
Merri
one.
Mr. Mr. Merriweather would be enthralled with what's happening tonight.
Right.
Tonight we have a full moon. The
Oh.
full moon it'll officially turn full, 100% illuminated, on December the 12th, which is, of course, if you're writing a check, 12/12.
Right.
And at the moment when it does turn full, it will be 12:12 a.m. So it is going to be full on 12/12 at 12:12.
Oh,
So a lot of
that's
12s up
cool.
there tonight.
Well, you know the joke from that show, right? Who was the medium?
The medium? You
What
mean
was the name of the medium? It
Ethel?
was Ethel, but what was the name of the medium? Our medium for tonight, Madame Rare.
Madam Ray.
And what was the comment? Well done, medium rare. We're very
Oh,
silly. Okay, so you still haven't answered my question. What map do you want me to start with?
oh, let's start with the surface map. Obviously,
All right.
it's calm, and at least locally here, it's clear now. And with that fresh snow cover, I still have some snow cover on the grass and on some of the trees. So that full moon illuminating the trees and the grass tonight, making it for a rather picturesque scene as we move through the final days before Christmas.
And by the way, you know, you're often we're often looking for lows to developing lows and things along that line. Last night was basically a simple cold front with maybe a flat wave that was so flat you probably couldn't even find it. That doesn't happen too often up here, but it seems like in recent years we've been getting more of these types of. Maybe it runs in cycles, or maybe we just didn't pay attention when we were younger. But it's kind of interesting to see a cold front come on through with this just very flat nature to it, and then you, excuse me, and you wind up, with a few inches of snow on the backside. Doesn't happen that way in our neck of the woods, anyway.
I noticed that the best model run last night was not any of the standard models that we look at, like the NAM or the GFS. In fact, some of those models during the 15 and 18Z runs, they were giving us practically nothing in some places.
Right.
Where we picked up locally again a couple 3 inches, but the plumes, la plumes,
The
did
Plumes actually, yes,
fantastic.
Les Plumes did pretty well.
Yes.
They certainly kind of held their own, and the numbers were higher. I noticed last night the numbers going east across Long Island were going higher than White Plains and in places west, and that kind of was a tip off to me that this was going to wind up being more from the city east than the city west. But yeah, the Plumes did pretty good. I will agree with you on that.
Yes, and also, I guess we can give a tip of the hat also to the Canadian global model. That model had a bit more in terms of precip and snowfall projected from last night's system, as opposed to, again, the GFS and the NAM. So, but the Plumes, I think did very well indeed with last night, and we'll see how well it does now
Right.
in the coming days ahead.
Well, I'm just moving the surface map over. Since I'm down in the southeastern U.S., I've got a high in Tennessee near me, and I think it made it. We were down this morning to the mid 30s, and I think we made it back to about low 50s today. Now we're starting to chill off again tonight, but the air that's up across the Great Lakes. They're actually analyzing a weak cold front in western New York and western PA. Temperatures are in the teens and single digits and even down below zero as you head up toward Minnesota. So this cold shot is actually pretty impressive, but it's going out really, really fast. I mean, usually these cold air masses, they go in, they come in, and they take their times moving out. This one's going to fly out in a hurry because there's no block. There's absolutely, you were as far away from any blocking as you could possibly get in the Atlantic. There's absolutely nothing to slow it down.
And the warm air advection that will be moving in on Friday, rather rapid. I think we're looking at Friday as opposed to Thursday. Friday is going to be a rather cloud-filled day, and it would not be at all surprising, Joe, at least with an onshore flow on Friday, that we could see not anything steady, but maybe some spotty or spitty type of precipitation during the course of the day on Friday. And if it gets in early enough on Friday, some spots may even see a few, pellets of ice or sleet, although I think the majority of the precip on Friday will fall either later in the day or hold off until evening. And by that time, temperatures will have warmed enough so that we'll be looking at just straight rain here.
Yeah, I'm just looking. I'm just pulled up the surface map, just running up the Northeast where it's in, across Maine and New Hampshire. We're in the teens. Maybe a couple of isolated single digits, but mostly teens. It's 20s across New York State and through Pennsylvania. It's low 30s down near the coast. And then I'm just running back up to back over to Ohio and Indiana and Illinois, where we're seeing temperatures in the teens. And you start moving up north of Chicago. Chicago on the Ob. Actually, Gary Regional Airport is 19. For some reason, the numbers around Chicago were missing. But going up into Wisconsin, you start to get to, a couple of -7 at Taylor County Airport. I mean, this is really cold stuff that's behind it. So it's hard to imagine sometimes that you could see an air mass this cold come in, and while the core of that cold air is going to go by to our north, but it will be nearby that it goes in and it goes out quick. But it does, and that all that precip that's going to come up later Friday and Friday night is going to be rain almost clear all the way up to Caribou, which is also very unusual.
Right, and it's just going to, as I said, it's just going to charge up here. Again, as you pointed out, with the lack of any blocking, the cold air comes in, but it's going to move very quickly out, just out ahead of that next round of precip. And it looks like we could have a fairly decent amount again of precipitation come late Friday night and into Saturday, especially the first half of Saturday. And we might be looking at, dare I say, another 1 to maybe approaching 2 inches before this is all over.
Yeah, I could see it. That makes sense to me. I got the nationwide watches. I just wanted to bring up the watches and warnings. There hasn't been a whole lot going on during this week so far, but we've got winter weather advisories up in parts of northern Wisconsin with winter storm warnings on the upper peninsula of Michigan and in a small sliver in northeastern Wisconsin. And then we've got a peppering of winter weather advisories, winter storm warnings, and winter storm watches running up from some parts of the Colorado Rockies and then on up through northern Utah, western Wyoming, and northwestward from there into western Montana and into Washington State and parts of Oregon. But otherwise, much of the rest of the country is fairly quiet. So I'm going to jump over, Joe. I'm going to bring up we'll bring up the GFS here. And give me 1 second. I'll pull it up on the screen. We'll put the moisture field on here. And of course I have it where it started at the 384 hour, which we don't want to do. But so there's your high. I mean, it races out. And now you got all this rain that develops in the southeast and over where I am right now in northern Georgia. And by Friday night, there's actually a little bit of ocean moisture that comes in, much like it did yesterday, where we had I'm sorry, I'm just kind of losing track here. There was some stuff that came in off the ocean. I'm sorry, this was on Monday morning, okay? And then, so the rain started along the coast around New Jersey and southern New England early. Then there was a little gap, and then you had this main area of rain that developed from the front coming in from the west, and that came in later in the day. Well, we're seeing a little bit of ocean rain that shoots up here by Friday evening, and then by overnight Friday night into Saturday morning, we get clobbered with solid rain, and again all the way up to Caribou, it's all rain from start to finish, which is a little bit unusual to see it that far north.
Yes, and before people up in, I saw something a few days ago where places like Caribou, based upon the long-term 30-year averages, 90% chance of having snow on the ground Christmas. Obviously, if Christmas were this weekend, that wouldn't pan out. But as we mentioned, after we go through this little bomb on Friday night and Saturday, things start shaping up and setting up for the next atmospheric atrocity, if you will,
Yeah.
or late Monday night and Tuesday, which, again, still kind of questionable as to exactly what form it will take. But I'll tell you what, I just said right now on the forecast I posted on my Facebook page Tuesday, wintry mix, or it could be snow or rain. It's still, 5 days out.
Well,
So,
there's a couple of things I want to touch on before we even get to that, because this first thing pulls out. Saturday afternoon, there's a low sitting virtually over White Plains on the GFS, if you want to believe it, and it runs up toward the St. Lawrence Valley, and rather gets pretty deep there, like a 978-ish low. Uh, I thought what was odd, I don't know if you saw the 18Z NAM model, and I'm trying to figure out why it did this, but it actually has a lead low that comes out a little faster, or actually a lot faster, than the GFS, that runs up so that by Saturday morning, much of the rain from New York City south and west is done, but the isobars are all stretched down all the way down to the southeast coast of the United States, where another low develops, so that by Sunday morning, there's a 983 low sitting near Providence in Rhode Island, with rain back to New Jersey. And this, I'm sorry, this is at 1 a.m. on Sunday morning, which was as far as the 18Z went. It's a little different from this. I don't know why it's doing it, where it's got this lead energy that comes out, and then it makes another low with the upper trough when it bodily swings around and goes negative. If you look on the 500, in fact, it's hard to even find where that lead stuff comes from on Friday night, Saturday morning. It's just basically the ridge pulling out, but and the main trough doesn't really swing up here until about 1 a, maybe around early Sunday morning sometime. I don't know, I'm a little confused with why the dam did what it did.
the isobars get a little baggy, if you will.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the GFS, which is not quite the same. It just kind of, moves the trough along. It doesn't really lift it up like a gigantic arm, because it's plunging everything out in the west and getting ready to set up the next system. So, look, either way, it doesn't make a difference for us. I'm just wondering, for parts of upstate New York, if there's a second low that comes up like that, you could make a case for a changeover to snow upstate somewhere and up into western New England as the low goes by. But that low, let's forget that for now. But that low, the important thing to me is that sets up this 50-50 briefly, this little bit of a blocky look to it. I like to use the term blocky. So let me bring up that upper air so we can take a look at it. And on this particular run of the GFS, Joe, it's there, but it's also, you've got this next trough on Monday on the GFS is already, let me change colors here. Are you able to see it on the screen, on your screen? Are you
Well,
watching?
I'm watching the what everybody else is watching, except it's about a minute or so behind.
Right.
So, but I
You'll see it when it comes up. So,
yeah.
so I've got you've got this upper low that's sitting just east of Newfoundland, but there's this other big upper low that's dropping down in central Canada, and then of course you've got this split flow. I love this split flow that we have this year in the Pacific, by the way, because it keeps sending these weather systems along in the southern branch, and it's just, in my view, it's just a matter of time before one of them. We saw that happen back 10 days ago with a pretty sizable snowstorm that was just inland. And I think over time, if we hold this split flow, if the north at some point sends down something, we could see we could see something snow wise a bit further to the south the next time around. But my point is here, you got that low at 50 and 50, and one of the differences between the GFS and the European is that the GFS kind of wants to amplify that next trough fairly quickly and kick that 50-50 low out of here, whereas the European and the Canadian are not quite as deep with that trough swinging down into the west. And the 50-50 upper low near Newfoundland has a longer identity there. It just kind of hangs around long enough. And I think it keeps things a little colder here for Monday night into Tuesday. So that's where the main differences lie, as far as I can see.
I don't really think. I don't really think, though, we're not going to see any precipitation from that system until probably late Monday night, or maybe just after midnight. So anybody who's going around on Monday concerned about this, I think Monday will just be a day where we'll see sun give way to an increasing and thickening deck of high clouds. And I'm thinking that the first whatever we get, snow or sleet or whatever precip that falls, probably will hold off until after midnight or around midnight on Monday night, and then whatever we get, the full thrust will come our way in the second half of the overnight and on into the first part of the day on Tuesday.
Okay, so I'm going to bring the evolution of that Monday Tuesday system in here. So you got energy that comes into the west, gradually translates its way eastward. You got a low that comes out of the southern plains by Monday morning. It's near St. Louis by Monday afternoon, and it's got that arc of snow, northern Illinois, northernmost Indiana, northern Ohio, southern Michigan, into Chicago, Milwaukee. Whoops. Actually, I'm just going back a one run where the low is a little bit further to the south, oddly enough. But that low goes into northern Indiana and right over Lake Erie. And, it's holding on to the primary and taking it west of the Appalachians, which means that, at least for the coast, that's a snow to rain for the coast, and actually it might even be minimal snow on the coast before it goes to rain if we wind up with a primary like that. The Canadian was like the European; they were very similar. So I'm going to bring that up, and the Canadian was Joe. It had much flatter look to it. The low where the GFS was had it up near St. Louis and on its way to western Ohio. I mean, you could barely find it. It's probably just a weak low in northeast Mississippi that moves across northern Tennessee toward West Virginia and then starts the redevelopment process so that you have that arc of snow to the north. And I think that is where, in a situation, if that's correct, where you've got this flatter look, flatter because the upper low that's sitting near Newfoundland is holding on a bit longer, and the trough that's swinging across into the Great Lakes is not as phased as the GFS. So you've got snow in PA, snow in northern New Jersey, an area of ice down to Maryland and northeast Virginia, snow southern New England, Long Island at the start, at least for a few hours before you start to see maybe a change over to rain. And the secondary low takes over, and it's off the New Jersey coast and heads towards Cape Cod. Toward Cape Cod.
Right.
Yes. So it's all going to be a matter of how strong that upper low is east of Newfoundland.
Right. If you believe the Canadian, there's no problem. We don't see anything in terms of precip until first thing on Tuesday morning, and then it looks like it takes time for the primary system to lateral the energy to the second system out over the ocean by late Tuesday night or early Wednesday morning, and then that system trails away slowly but surely. You believe the Canadian, this is a prolonged event from first thing Tuesday all the way out till the end of the day on Wednesday. So
right.
It'll be interesting to see how, again, Canadian, whether or not the Canadian is handling this properly, or whether or not the other models are a little bit better in modeling and moving more progressively.
Well, I'm trying to bring up the European here, courtesy of pivotalweather.com, so we could look at what it did, just as a standpoint of where what comes out with the low. And if you look at the map, By the way, these pivotal maps, I don't know if you've been looking at them, they are very good. The pivot, where the GFS has that low so far up to the north and heading toward northwest Ohio, the European, just like the Canadian, Monday morning has a low, down in south central Mississippi. It's actually got snow up into northern Virginia by Monday morning on the 120 hour. On the 126, it just kind of sits there, and it's got a low in eastern Tennessee. 132 still has a low in eastern Tennessee, but now you're starting to see snow and ice breaking out in southern PA, southern New Jersey, and up just north and west of the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area. I'm just 126. Snow almost to about New York City, a large area of sleet and freezing rain, southern PA, down into northeast Virginia, northern West Virginia, with a 1,006 low in southwest Virginia. And then at 144, it's got the low just east of Cape May or southeast of Atlantic City, and the rain snow line probably just northwest of New York City by Tuesday morning. So definitely a much different look on the European and Canadian models than we're seeing on the GFS. And it's a matter of depth, and it's a matter of having a little bit more blockiness on the European than on the GFS.
It's interesting because a lot of times we have seen the Canadian side with or join the camp of the European. The Canadian European are pretty much similar, but not in this particular setup coming our way for early next week.
Yeah, just a quick view of the long range, Joe, is I've noticed from various runs, and it's on this run on the 18Z, you're seeing higher than normal pressures all across northern Labrador, up to Greenland, and all across the North Pole. The overall jet is suppressed further south. There's more blockiness to it. I just pulled up the Canadian here, and it has that blocky look, and even the GFS on a week from Saturday, it's got a wrapped up low at 50 and 50, and the next trough swinging into the Ohio Valley and going pretty far to the south, for that matter. So it's holding on. This is kind of what it looked like when we had the situation back 10 days ago. And
if you look at this is now what I'm seeing here is December 21st, and it's got the 50-50 low. It's got that next trough coming into the Pacific coast. Now, if you're into snow and if you are dreaming of a white Christmas, you want to hope that maybe that 50-50 low holds its ground a little longer than what we're seeing on this progression here, allowing for that trough in the Pacific to move in and maybe generate some sort of a storm that might possibly bring us some wintry precipitation in time for the holiday. But again, we're talking about something that's 246.
Yeah, but even right. Oh yeah, I know. It's a ways away yet. It's 14 days. But even so, to me, to me, I think the takeaway should be that you do have a blocky look. Now, whether it means that something winds up happening or not remains to be seen. But I'll tell you this: I'd rather have this look on the map if you're looking for snow to happen, in and around Christmas time, and give yourself a few days of range here. Let's say from the 20th to the 26th or 7th. You certainly would rather have an upper air that looks like this than one where you've got a deep trough down in the west and a strong ridge up the east coast of the southwest flow, screaming at you from Baja all the way up to Bangor, Maine. This is a much more favorable upper air for something to happen somewhere with this. And that would be my takeaway at this point, rather than get into specifics.
Right. I should also point out that the Climate Prediction Center, up until about a day or two ago, was suggesting or indicating probability of above normal temperatures for much of the central and eastern part of the United States. And now all of a sudden on today's 6 to 10 day outlook, they have the Northeast still in below normal temperatures. But then they bring it back to near normal on the 8 to 14 day prog. The difference also here is that while they had us perpetually wet, above normal precipitation, now what they're looking at is a situation where it's wet and then it actually dries out toward, let's say, the 20th or 21st of December and toward Christmas Day. So some changes over the last day or two in the probability outlook of the Climate Prediction Center as to cold versus warm and wet versus dry, but maybe more of a trend toward colder conditions, perhaps, as opposed to the unseasonably mild temperatures they were suggesting up until, again, about a day or two ago for our part of the country.
I took you off the screen for a second as I just wanted to go on to see everybody on the chat board, and because some they're having their own little conversation, you know, uh, about one thing or another. But Timothy Veltman is a big fan of my rhyming theme. You know, when weather patterns in a given winter or any season, they don't repeat exactly, but they do rhyme. And I think you're seeing that right now. You're seeing how things have evolved in the uh, last 5 or 6 weeks, and there is a string of similarity to all those systems, and I think that's going to hold on for a little while. And quite frankly, as someone like myself, who I'm a snow lover. I've admitted it openly, and although I know how to check my weeniness at the door when it comes to work, but I have to say that with regards to what I'm seeing so far this December is something that if I were, with snow lovers, you should be kind of excited about. It's 12 days into the month, and the snowfalls have been they were really actually running above average. The big snow, just inland of the coast, it's been very interesting 12 days. You've already had two events. I don't know what more you can ask for the first half of December. Would you not agree with me with this?
Yeah, well, I've already had up here, I've had 6.5 inches over the last 10 days of
Yeah.
snowfall, and we're not even halfway through the month yet. So it's been active up here, and it
Well,
looks
I've
like
had I've had three. I had 1.7, and I'm going by what I saw in my area. So let's just average of that, a little over two. So I mean, I've had about 3.5. Average December for me is somewhere around 6 to 6.5. So that's fine with 12 days in and plenty of time to have it. One or maybe two more events that could put down some snow accumulation. I don't know how much outside of a Boxing Day type storm. What else can you get?
yeah, and I always used to think of, and we've touched upon this over time. December used to be a throwaway month in terms of snowfall. We get, or I think we used to average at Central Park like 3 or 4 inches, and in recent years, it's anything but a throwaway month.
Yeah.
And we've had our fair share of snow in this month of December, and already, as I said, for where I am and where you are, we're not even halfway through the month yet, and already we've seen anywhere from like 3 to 5, 3 to 6 inches of snow, and
Well,
who knows what's coming our way for the second half of the
the
month.
the snow numbers for December are a little strange because they are skewed. There have been a number of big snowstorms in the month of December. The thing
Right.
is that they don't happen very often, every 10, 15, 20 years. And it just happened that we had two back to back in '09, 10, and 10, 11, I guess, or something like that. But yeah, you get these 20-inch plus snowstorms every 15 or 20 years, and they kind of skew your numbers up. Most of the time in December, it's still a bit tricky and it's still a bit too warm. Not even just for down the coast, but even in areas inland, it's still not quite there yet. I think the sec. I also think if you took the stats from December 20th on and looked at those separately, you probably would find that the vast majority of your bigger snowfalls are in that time frame, which makes sense because you're 20 days into the month, and you're a lot colder from December 20th to 30th than you are from December 1st to December 20th.
And also at Central Park, I could remember how the annual snowfall was generally, and this goes back to the 90s. In the 90s, I could remember the average was something like
Two.
22 or 24 inches. Well, I actually did the last 30 years, Joe, I added everything up and averaged everything out over the last 30 years. And in spite of the fact that the 90s were a decade where we had a paucity of significant snows, many below normal years, in spite of that, we came back roaring back over the last 20 years. And now at Central Park, over the last 30 years, the average snowfall is 30.1 inches.
Yeah. No, I've been the new 30-year normals are going to come out in 2021. So there's going to be the whole thing gets recalculated. The 90s was the least. The 70s, 80s, and 90s. I remember I did this research back a long, long time ago in New York City. Anyway, the 70s, 80s, and 90s were the three least snowiest decades on record, with the 90s being the least snowiest. 80s
Right.
was second least, 70s was third least. So, and the reason why the 90s wound up being the least was because 8 of those years were below normal, but five of those years were like really crazy below normal. You could count the number of flakes that fell on your hand, for the
Right.
whole winter. So
There was one winter, I believe, where we had a late season
it
snowfall.
came after the first day of spring. It was the only
Right.
accumulating snow of the whole winter season, and it came after the first day of spring.
Isn't
Yeah,
that amazing?
exactly.
Yeah.
The thing is, uh, the the recalculation now takes out the 80s and adds the period from 2010 to 2020, which you've already done. That's going to bring the normals up over 30 inches. So it's going to increase by 5 inches. And if you look at the long-term New York City average, going back to 1869, it's at around 28.8, 29. So we've suddenly gone from when it was just the 70s, 80s, and 90s, the average snowfall for those 30 years was 20 inches. Now, when it went to 80s, 90s, and 22, the noughts, the 20 noughts, the normal jumped up to 25, and now it's going to jump up to 30. The Long Island normal average goes from 32 to 42. I mean, it's taking a huge 10-inch jump. When that if you recalculate it, if you calculate that for a 30-year average, it's going to go to 42 inches
Wow.
for the season. So that whole nonsense of the coast not gets less snow. That's not entirely true. It's true for New Jersey because New Jersey is a north-south coastline. It's not true for Long Island because it's an east-west coastline, and that makes that's a huge difference because we've got New England to the north, and that keeps things colder a lot of the time.
Right. Right. It's been amazing.
Yep.
I Who would have thought? I mean, when we were just starting in the business back in the 70s, it seemed like we never got any snow in the tri-state area. Actually, the decade of the 70s and the decade of the 90s, two decades where we had a paucity, a lack of any snow except for one or two winters. But in those one or two winters, like for example, the winter of '78, the winter of '96, we went whole hog
Yeah,
with
but those were
snowfall.
so few. You waited you waited almost a half a generation in between those those years. It was a
Right.
long drought, and I think the snow lovers in the Northeast, and particularly in the I-95 corridor, the youngins, they have no clue. The ones that were born at really the ones that were born after 1990, they just they're so clueless with regards to what a struggle it was to just even see a coating to an inch sometimes. It just
You get
they've had it really really good.
We really get it very excited. Back in the 70s, if there was a storm of, let's say, 6 inches, snow lovers would be jumping for joy because for them, for those of us who were into snow, a 6 inch snowfall was like, wow, that's a big snowfall, you know. And now here we are, 6 inches, we just throw that off like it was nothing.
Hmm.
Let's have 12 or 18. It's changed so much over the last over the span of the last generation or so.
So let's switch subjects a little bit. Um, n- my goatee. What do you think? It's filled
That
in.
looks pretty good.
Yeah.
I think I think the goatee fits you a lot better. I can remember when you just had the mustache when you were much younger.
That was my Tom Selleck period.
Yes, yes. But I think the goatee looks very
Thank you.
very.
The
What's the word I'm looking for? Um,
mature
uh, but a
serial
panache. It gives you a
serial
certain air of
killer.
panache.
No, serial killer.
No, no.
Actually,
Yes,
if you look at the last time I grew it, because it was much less gray, it was very dark. It was almost black, very dark brown.
right.
And there's a picture on my Facebook page where I bug my eyes out. I really do look like I'm about to, I look. I have that serial killer look. Cereal. Um, so anyway, yeah, I'm actually. This is great. I know you and I are not exactly feeling the same way about how things have gone, but at least from my standpoint, for me, it's I'm enjoying it because I got to run down here in Georgia to spend time with my grandson. I hadn't seen him in a couple of months, so I'm kind of happy.
Well, I tell you, you're right. I kind of wish I was back in the saddle, so to speak, and hopefully that may happen. But the thing is, I used to get stressed out when we had impending winter storms because I always hated driving
Yeah,
in
me too.
snow and ice and whatever. And now, looking at, let's say, next Tuesday's event or Monday night's event, bring it on. I'm not going anywhere.
I just need I set up the computer by my double doors at home with the windows looking in the backyard. I can just watch the snow fall and I don't have to drive in it, and it's a totally stress-free environment. And I agree with you. Not having to drive in it is huge. I've driven in every big snowstorm that I can think of in the last 20 some odd years, and I'm too old for it, Joe. I don't want to do it anymore.
I remember one storm in particular was the day before New Year's Eve in the year 2000. It was a Saturday actually, and I didn't at that time I didn't work on weekends, but they called me in because it was such a big major event. They called me in at like 7 o'clock in the morning, and I traveled. I was traveling in snow. There was already like 4 or 5 inches of snow on the road at that particular time, and I was traveling. I was living in Levittown, Long Island,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to travel from Levittown to Yonkers. And let me tell you something: when there's 4 or 5 inches of snow on the ground, and you have to travel from Levittown to Yonkers, going over the Throgs Neck Bridge and negotiating the Sawmill Parkway, or whatever. That wasn't fun. That you wonder where all of this white came from. I think much of it
Yeah.
came from that one particular drive, that particular morning. So
Well, and it's only in the last for me. It's only was the last 4 or 5 years working at FiOS that I was doing those drives across the Throgs Neck Bridge or the Whitestone. And what I used to do is, I used to, if there was a pending snow, I would stay at my mother's house because she was 5 minutes away from where from work. But even those 5 grueling minutes on one of the storms back a couple of years ago,
I remember that. Yeah.
and it had just started. And I had the little Toyota, which is closing in on 300,000 miles. By the way, I drove it down here again for the second time because I want to get to that 300,000. So I made it to my first daughter, and now I made it to my second daughter. So now all I have to do is make it back home, and then I will retire it because I'm not going to try that again. But it was scary. I just, I'm not doing that. I'm just not. It's not worth a job. It's not worth putting your life at risk over a job. Not at all. Not doing it. And that's really kind of where I'm at with
Right.
all of this going forward.
Understood.
Yeah,
Understood.
they're going to have to throw boatloads of money for. I'm serious. They're going to have to throw boatloads of money in order to get me out of this chair. And no, and I'll tell you, Joe, I'm dead serious about this. I am literally boatloads. If you're not going to throw boatloads of money, I'm not interested. So, if at least from my standpoint, if you're watching and you're thinking, I'd like to put this person on your station, I think what I've just told you is you really don't want to put me on your station. Okay? So don't call us, we'll call you. I'm sorry. I'm just kind of I'm in an odd mood today because I've been seeing a few things running around on the social media chats and all, uh, I just it just kind of some of them hit me in a bit of an odd way, and I'm just responding to that.
Understood. It just struck me that this sets a record for us,
What's
this
that?
particular Joe and Joe, because you're all the way down in Georgia and I'm up here in north of New York City.
Yeah,
How many miles are we talking to each other and talking to everybody? It used to be like
we're about 800 miles apart.
you and I used to be sitting like 6 inches apart, and now we are 800 miles apart, but we're still doing what we've been doing
Well, we grew up a mile apart and didn't know each other for what, 20 years?
20 years or something like
Right.
that.
I mean, the first 19, 20 years of our lives, you and I were basically at times blocks apart from each other, and we
Right,
didn't know
right.
until we met. Till it was in our late teens, early 20s, and yeah, it's now we're 800 miles apart, and you know what? Who would have thunk back then that you would be sitting in your chair in your office at home, and I would be sitting in my daughter's dining room chair in Atlanta, and having a conversation that's being seen by more people now than were watching us on television in any given day.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, kind of amazing,
It
and
is.
I don't feel any different, in spite of the fact that the two of us now together have like 80 years of experience in this business. I don't really feel any different than I did when we first got started, like all those years, 4 decades ago.
It's unfortunate because the TV world is not the same. It isn't even close. I can't even mince words about the fact that it's completely different. In some ways, it's the same, but in ways that are really really important, it's so different from what it was, and it is it's unfortunate because you should be able to, at least after you've put in a solid run of time, to finish on your terms, and it's not fair. It really is not. It's not just not fair. It really goes to the heart of the uncaring nature, in my opinion, the uncaring nature of the people you work for, because it, all your experience, your 40 years, your days of coming to work on your days off, your days of giving up family time because you were told you had to come in, and it it means nothing. It meant zero. And I always knew that in the back of my mind. And every once in a while, you need a fresh kick in the ass to remind you that that's the case, and that's what it is. It's a big zero. And the worst part of it to me, Joe, is that they pretend it's not. That's the thing that gets me.
Yeah.
That they pretended that wasn't the case. Uh, and it's such BS. It was just such nonsense. Uh, I
I,
don't know.
I, I let me just, and I'll gloss over as much of the details because I don't want to be specific here. But you and I have a mutual friend. This mutual friend lives north of here.
Yes, I know
Uh,
you're
he's
talking
he's
about.
he's a meteorologist, and he tipped me off to the fact that there was a station in upstate New York that had an opening on weekends for a weather anchor, and he said maybe you ought to contact the station and tell them that you're available, and I did, and I sent it my portfolio, and I sent my CV to both the news director and also the chief meteorologist, and I expected at least a phone call,
Oh,
at
good
least
luck.
or a cover letter,
Good
for goodness
luck.
sake, right?
Yeah.
And all of that material arrived about 2 weeks in advance of a major snowstorm that hit that part of upstate New York. And you would think that with a major snowstorm and with them being one person down on their weather roster now, one of their people left to go to a different part of the country, you would think that once my portfolio landed on their desks, that say, hey, this is the guy that can help us fill in that gap, and a big storm coming, so let's contact this guy. Never heard from them. Instead, they had what they did was over that weekend of that big snowstorm, they had one of their guys work 3 out of 4 shifts. He worked the morning shift, the evening shift. They gave him a break. They didn't call him in the next morning, but then he had to work the evening shift again the next day, Saturday and Sunday. So they worked this guy into the ground during a major storm. Again, I'm sitting here waiting for a phone call, never got that. And now my friend, our mutual friend, who tipped me off to this station in need of an extra person, he used to work at this station about a year or two ago until he left to go into IT.
Right.
They contacted him and said, hey, we need some people to work during Christmas and New Year's. Could you possibly help us out? And he's out of the business. But they called him and said, could you help us? And meanwhile, my stuff is probably still sitting on their desks. They didn't want to. I don't understand why.
And you know something? The poor fool that did the 3 shifts out of 4, thinking that, come contract time, they're going to remember this. Okay?
How many times?
If you're
wait a minute. How many times in your career have you doubled or even done triple shifts for television or radio station?
Of course. It meant nothing. It was a big zero.
Right.
It meant nothing. I kind of knew that was the case. You delude yourself sometimes to thinking, especially if you're not, you were in a prime time position, so you were set. I was not. So I was still looking for that prime time slot. So you do those things because you think that, well, if you want to get into that spot, not doing them is going to guarantee you that you're not going to ever get it.
Yeah,
but the reality is, I knew that there was just bullshit.
Prime time or no prime time, there were not a few times when I was told when I got home. One night I got home after working my shift and was told that the morning guy was not going to be able to come in because he was sick. And we don't have anybody else to fill in. You're going to have to come back in.
Yeah.
And that happened more than a few times in my career. So I'm happy that if I'm not doing what I used to do, I'm happy that, number one, I'm not having the worry of traveling and all of that crazy weather, and number two, I don't have to deal with that stuff anymore about, oh, gee, Joe, you have to come in after you just got home, and maybe you'll get a couple hours sleep before you have to start work again.
Yeah, I agree. All right, you know what? Let's wrap it up. Hang on one second. I just got to check something. Be right back.
Am I on camera at least? Can they hear me?
Yeah, they can hear you.
Hi, everybody. Oh, thank God he's finally out of here.
Nice.
Oh, my goodness.
No, my daughter has a refrigerator that makes noise, and I just wanted to make sure.
Compressor.
Yeah, it's like one of those wine refrigerator things, and I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't my grandson who's upstairs sleeping, and I just had to check to make sure that was the case. So anyway, today's Wednesday, so I will probably be back in the New York area early next week, and we'll do this again.
Just in time for Monday night and Tuesday, Joe.
Oh, listen, if there's going to be something Monday night or Tuesday, I promise you that I will be back. Because I'm not driving in it, okay? If it looks like I have to meet this stuff up in Northern Virginia, I'm gonna just drive straight through and get back on Sunday, because I just don't want to be trapped someplace else for an extra day or two. So if that being the case, we'll do something early next week with this. And in the meantime, just carry on. You decorated your house for Christmas. That's all set, correct?
It's 90% decorated now. Tomorrow I'm going on the little giant ladder, and this is the procedure I hate every year. Opening it up to like 20 feet, getting it to stand up in front of the peak of the roof of my house, and string these lights, and also put the giant wreath up. I told my wife I'm getting too old for this.
Mm-hmm.
I get our son to do this, but I'll be plodding up that ladder tomorrow, and hopefully, the good Lord willing, nothing will happen, and I'll be back with you sometime early next week.
All right. Well, please do, because I can't do the show alone. All right.
Well, you do a pretty good job alone.
What's that?
You do a pretty good job alone.
I know, but I can't do our show alone.
Oh yes.
Okay.
All right.
I need you actually physically to be here. So and not wrapped up in some cast. All
Right.
right. So
And we have to make a date. We have to make a date to get you up to Rancho Rayo.
well,
Uh, some, some,
once I get back, absolutely. Bring I'll get you all squared away so you can do your show on Joe Rayo Weather. If you haven't subscribed to his channel, this is your opportunity to do so.
right, on the
Um,
YouTube channel, Joe Rayo Weather. You know what crossed my mind, Joe? Rather than go through OBS and doing everything all the modern way, to set up an easel with a bulletin board
oh
behind
God.
me and some oak tag and make up like an Uncle Wethby type
Well, if
character.
you want to, you could do
Like
that. You want to bring out the rotary telephone, you can also do that too. All right. Because I know you've got one there somewhere. You've got to
uh,
have one.
I, I probably have something upstairs in the attic.
All
Yeah.
right. All right. Look, have a great rest of your night. And to everybody watching tonight, thanks for being here. I hope the audio was fine. I didn't see anybody saying it wasn't, so that's good news. But I'll be back tomorrow, and we'll do this all over again without Mr. Rayo. We'll wait till early next week to bring him back. All right.
Okay.
All right. Good night, Joe. Have a good one.
You too.
Take care.